family devastated, desperate for answers.
You're a coward, and God will deal with you. My God will deal with you.
A message from a grieving family member to the suspect of a double shooting in North Lauderdale Wednesday. 34-year-old Andre O'Dane Anglin. Detectives are still searching for him.
He took my baby's life away. He took my best friend, my niece.
It was a quiet Wednesday morning in North Lauderdale. The kind of morning where kids rush to school half-dressed, toast still warm in hand, and mothers juggle backpacks and goodbyes with practiced grace. But at 9:02 a.m. in the parking lot of a small townhouse complex on Tam O'Shanter Boulevard, all that normalcy vanished in a flash of gunfire. A mother and her teenage daughter lay motionless beside their car, backpacks scattered like fallen feathers. A child's car seat sat untouched in the back. And just like that, the day collapsed into something none of them would ever forget. This is the story of Jennifer Bellony, a radiant, driven mother of 3, and the man she once believed was her forever. A man who, in the end, made her pay the ultimate price for choosing peace over pain. I'm your host, and this is True Crime Watch HD. If you care about stories that deserve to be heard, stories of warning, of heartbreak, and of justice long denied, please consider subscribing. This one will stay with you. Jennifer Bellony was the kind of woman who made people feel like family after 5 minutes. Friends described her as radiant, not just in appearance but in spirit. She wasn't just admired. She was felt. Warmth. Drive. Grace. If someone needed help with taxes, credit repair, or how to build wealth from nothing, Jennifer was the woman they called. By the time she was in her early 30s, she was juggling entrepreneurship, single motherhood, and a financial services career, all with a smile that told the world, "I've got this." But behind that smile, something darker had been growing. Slowly, quietly, patiently. And it had a name, Andre O'Dane Anglin. They had once been teenage sweethearts. Young, wild, and full of dreams. Andre was charming back then, quick with a joke, smoother than most. To a teenage Jennifer, he wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a promise. A maybe. A future. But here's the thing about charm. It can feel like love, until it turns into control. They met in college. Fell hard. Moved fast. And despite warnings from family, Jennifer wasn't allowed to date at the time. She kept seeing him. In her eyes, Andre could do no wrong. They married young. Had their first child, Anastasia, shortly after. Jennifer, ever the nurturer, poured herself into motherhood. Andre didn't. While Jennifer built a career in finance and real estate, Andre drifted. Jobs came and went. Bills fell behind. He smoked, spent money recklessly, and over time began to show signs of something worse. Something unseen to outsiders but deeply felt inside their home. He began to control her. Isolate her. Break her spirit piece by piece. But Jennifer didn't leave. Not yet. Not when the first red flag waved. Not even when it became clear she was raising 3 children, and a grown man. You see, abusers don't always start with fists. They start with charm. Then control. Then silence. By the time the screams come, the victim's world is already built around the cage. And for Jennifer, that cage was invisible. Until it wasn't. On April 5, 2018, after years of enduring Andre's volatility, Jennifer filed for a domestic violence restraining order. She had reached a breaking point. She wanted out. For herself. For her kids. Especially Anastasia, who had grown into a beautiful, spirited teen. But something happened, something that happens far too often in these cases. Just 18 days later, the restraining order was dropped. Court records suggest she chose not to make it permanent. What? Maybe she still believed he could change. Maybe he promised to be better. Maybe, like so many others, she felt scared of what would happen if she followed through. She didn't know it then, but this decision would echo down the corridors of her life. A paper shield, folded and set aside. A moment where the system gave her a way out, but she didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, she tried to save him. She kept giving him money. Encouraged him to find work. Even got their local pastor involved, hoping maybe faith could do what love had failed to. But Andre didn't want help. He wanted control. By 2020, Jennifer had finally filed for divorce. The relationship was over on paper. But emotionally, spiritually, it wasn't done. Not for Andre. Jennifer was thriving. She'd bought her own home. She was raising all 3 children alone. She was done, and that truth was something Andre couldn't accept. He sent threats. Pressured her to reconcile. When that didn't work, he tried something darker. He began playing the victim. Threatening to end his own life. And Jennifer, ever compassionate, tried to help him again. She didn't want him back. But she didn't want him broken either. That's the thing about empaths, they try to rescue the very people sent to destroy them. She offered to help him find housing, sent money, encouraged his recovery. But Andre wasn't looking for healing. He was looking for a way back in. And when Jennifer finally, firmly told him the truth, that she had moved on, and he was no longer welcome, he made a decision. Not to get better, but to get even. April 14, 2022. Jennifer had just loaded her kids into the car. It was a school day like any other. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother. Jennifer picked up and mentioned something odd, a figure outside. Someone familiar. She thought it looked like Andre. Then she said, "I'll talk to you later," and hung up. That would be the last time anyone heard her voice. What happened next was swift and silent. Andre was waiting. It was still early. The sun hadn't fully settled over the palm-lined streets of North Lauderdale. Birds chirped in that pre-chaos quiet that only exists before a weekday school rush. Inside her townhouse, Jennifer Bellony was doing what mothers do. Getting the day started. Making sure the kids had their backpacks, shoes, maybe a packed lunch. Normal things. Mundane things. Things that make a house feel safe. And then, something shifted. She glanced outside. There was a figure. Distant but not unfamiliar. She told her mother about it over the phone. That someone was near the building. Someone who, from the way she described it, looked like him. Like Andre. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. "I'll talk to you later." That's what she said. And hung up. That would be the final sentence she ever spoke. Andre Anglin had vanished from her daily life long ago. At least in the ways that counted. No longer part of the household. No longer welcome. The divorce had seen to that. But sometimes ghosts don't need keys to get inside. They just need to know your habits. And Andre knew Jennifer's. Where she lived. What time she usually left. Who rode in the car. Which door she used. All the little things that seem harmless until they're weaponized by someone with a grudge. That morning he wasn't just nearby. He was waiting. It's not clear exactly how long Andre was watching. Minutes? Hours? But at approximately 9 a.m. Jennifer and her children stepped outside. Neighbors later described hearing two sharp cracks, like fireworks but colder. Deadlier. Emergency calls came flooding in. Jennifer was found outside her vehicle. The doors were open. One of the back seats still held a child's car seat. Nearby, her daughter was on the ground, her school things spilled across the pavement, as if the morning routine had been frozen in time and shattered in place. Andre didn't run. He vanished. Eyewitnesses said the scene felt like something out of a nightmare. One moment, kids were walking to school. The next, people were screaming, running, covering their mouths in shock. A neighbor described it simply. "I saw a body on the ground. I didn't want to see that. I really didn't."
I seen a body land on the ground. I didn't want to see that.
The townhome community on Tam O'Shanter Boulevard quickly filled with law enforcement, investigators, and yellow tape. Inside the taped perimeter, 2 lives had been extinguished, but the trauma radiated far beyond that parking lot. Because there were still 2 other children at the scene, and they had witnessed everything. We won't go into details about their age or identities out of respect, and to comply with platform policy. But what's important to know is this. They were right there. In the car. On the way to school. When everything changed. The moment investigators confirmed the identities of the victims, there was no mystery about who they needed to find. Andre Anglin wasn't just a suspect. He was the only person Jennifer had ever named in prior legal filings for domestic abuse. He was the only one she'd ever feared enough to file a protective order against. That paper trail was clear, though short-lived. Back in 2018, Jennifer had filed for a restraining order. But she didn't finalize it. Whether it was pressure, manipulation, fear, or misplaced hope, she dropped it just weeks later. Since then, Andre had been in and out of her life. Not as a husband. Not even as a co-parent in the true sense. But like a storm cloud that refused to blow away. Sometimes calm. Other times, ominous. When deputies started looking into his background, more troubling patterns emerged. He had a prior conviction for domestic violence from over a decade earlier. His employment history was unstable. His personal life erratic. He'd made repeated threats in the past, not only toward others, but toward himself. He'd said multiple times that he was going to end it all. Sometimes crying. Sometimes begging. Sometimes manipulative. Jennifer, always the empath, had tried to help him. Even after the divorce. Even after the abuse. But no one, not even Jennifer, could have predicted this. The manhunt for Andre began immediately. Law enforcement agencies knew who they were looking for. A 34-year-old man, last known to frequent the Margate area, about 15 minutes away. He had no confirmed address, no regular job, no scheduled obligations, which made him unpredictable. Broward County Sheriff's Office labeled him armed and dangerous. Flyers went out. Crime Stoppers issued a $5,000 reward for information. News anchors referred to him as a suspect, but it was clear, no one else was being considered. Jennifer's family issued a plea. One that was part heartbreak, part desperation. Turn yourself in. Bring us peace, Andre. We did nothing but good to you. But Andre didn't answer. Back on Tam O'Shanter Boulevard, residents began placing candles, flowers, handwritten cards. Some knew Jennifer personally. Others didn't. But all of them felt something. One woman, who had never spoken a word to Jennifer, came by later that night to light a candle. I didn't know her. But I had to do something, she said. Another friend described her heartbreak. Jennifer wasn't just a mother. She was a light. A fighter. She always tried to see the good. Even in him. And then there was Anastasia, her daughter, who had grown up watching her mother persevere through hardship and heartbreak, who was planning her own future. Now, her voice would never be heard again. What did Jennifer see that morning? Did she know it was Andre for sure? Did she hesitate before walking outside? Could she have known that the same man she once gave everything to, would one day take everything away? These are the questions no investigation can fully answer. The kind that haunt families forever. But this case was far from over. Andre Anglin was still out there. And with each passing hour, the pressure to find him intensified. Because the longer he remained in the wind, the more it felt like justice was slipping away. By the end of that Wednesday morning, North Lauderdale was no longer just a suburb. It was a crime scene. Jennifer Bellony and her daughter were gone. Their bodies, covered with yellow tarps, lay beside the family car. Backpack straps peeked out beneath police markers. The rear passenger door still wide open. And somewhere out there, he was still moving. Still breathing. For the Broward Sheriff's Office and a grieving community, only one question mattered now. Where was Andre Anglin? What makes a man capable of extinguishing two lives in cold blood, in broad daylight, and then disappear? That was the question gripping detectives as they raced against time to locate a suspect who knew the city's shadows all too well. Andre Anglin didn't have a regular address. No registered vehicle. No job to trace. What he had was something far more dangerous. A motive, and nothing left to lose. Witnesses told police he was seen fleeing the scene on foot. Others believed he had help. But nobody knew for sure. All that was clear, he was gone. And as each hour passed, tension grew heavier in the air. Would he strike again? Was he still in the area? Or had he already crossed county lines, vanishing into some new neighborhood that didn't know his name? Law enforcement called in backup. Patrols doubled in Margate and Fort Lauderdale. The Broward Crime Stoppers offered a $5,000 reward for any lead. But even with every eye watching, Andre seemed to melt into the cracks. Behind the scenes, investigators worked around the clock to reconstruct Andre's movements. Not just that morning, but for the days leading up to the crime. What they found painted a disturbing portrait of a man in psychological free fall. Andre had always struggled to maintain control over his life, his finances, his relationships. Jennifer had been the structure, the glue, the one who kept things stable when everything else unraveled. But after the divorce, that stability disappeared. And with it, so did Andre's sense of identity. According to Jennifer's family, he'd started spiraling long before the shooting. He was jobless, directionless, and increasingly obsessed. Not with parenting, not with healing, but with getting Jennifer back, on his terms. He sent her messages. Sometimes angry, sometimes pitiful, sometimes manipulative. One day he'd say he wanted to fix things. The next he'd threaten to end his life. And somewhere in that toxic push and pull, Jennifer stopped responding. She had finally moved on. And that reality shattered something in him. We often imagine abusers as monsters, people who were always broken, always dangerous. But the truth is often more subtle, more insidious. Andre wasn't some faceless threat in the dark. He was someone Jennifer had once loved, trusted, built a life with. And that's what made him so dangerous. Because when someone like Andre loses control, when they realize they can't manipulate, can't dominate, can't dictate anymore, they don't just feel rejection. They feel annihilated. To them, your freedom feels like their death. And in Andre's warped mind, if he couldn't have Jennifer, no one could. But what he failed to understand was this. Jennifer wasn't just surviving without him, she was thriving. And that was the deepest wound of all. While detectives scoured the city, Jennifer's family clung to hope that Andre would turn himself in. Somewhere deep down they believed, or maybe just prayed, that guilt might break through. "Bring us peace, Andre," her aunt had said. "Turn yourself in. We did nothing but good to you." But Andre didn't turn himself in. He didn't make a statement. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He simply disappeared. For 4 days the city held its breath. Schools stayed on alert. Parents held their children closer. Jennifer's home remained sealed off, not just as a crime scene but as a grim memorial. Candles melted in the Florida sun. Balloons deflated. And still no sign of Andre. Until Monday evening. April 18th, just before 6 p.m. A surveillance team, part of Broward County's elite Viper unit, had been sweeping Sunrise Boulevard, an area known for its dense traffic and late-night movement. That's when they saw him. A man matching Andre's description, walking casually, like he didn't have the entire city looking for him. He entered a Circle K gas station on the 900 block. Deputies moved in quickly, alerting the clerk inside. The suspect had gone into the restroom. They surrounded the building. No sirens. No shouts. Just quiet coordination. One deputy approached the restroom door. He knocked. And then, a single sound. One gunshot. Muffled. Final. When they forced the door open, Andre was slumped against the far wall. The gun still in his lap. Just like that, the manhunt was over. No chase. No arrest. No trial. Just silence. The official statement from Sheriff Gregory Toney was swift and sharp. They located and tracked down a menace to society. Unfortunately, this coward decided to take his own life rather than face justice for the heinous murders he committed. And while some felt relief that the danger was over, others were left hollow. Because Andre's death didn't bring closure. It stole it. There would be no courtroom. No testimony. No explanation. No moment where Jennifer's children could look him in the eye and ask, why? There would only be that empty bathroom. And a city trying to make sense of something senseless. Jennifer's family still visits the spot where her car once sat. They leave flowers. Pictures. Notes written on folded paper. They remember her as a provider, a mother, a warrior who never stopped trying to help others, even those who didn't deserve it. They remember Anastasia as someone full of promise, vibrant, smart, funny. A daughter who looked up to her mother and reflected her strength. And they remember the 2 young children who were there, in the car, when it happened. They're safe now, but changed forever. The system, many argue, failed Jennifer, failed her children, and failed every other person who ever believed a restraining order was enough. Because a piece of paper can't stop a determined killer. There's a lesson in this tragedy, one that's easy to ignore when the news cycle moves on. It's this. Abuse doesn't always end with a breakup. In fact, for many survivors, the most dangerous time is after they leave. That's when control slips away. That's when resentment builds. That's when people like Andre start thinking in absolutes. Jennifer did everything she could. She left. She filed papers. She got a new home. She built a better life. But still, he came. And the question we're left with is this. How many more Jennifers are out there right now, praying the danger doesn't come back? A single mother. A loving daughter. 2 lives extinguished. 1 man dead in a gas station bathroom. And a silence that still lingers over a small street in North Lauderdale. But this isn't where the story ends. Because what Jennifer Bellony left behind was louder than the bullet that took her life. Her voice didn't vanish. It multiplied. And now we're going to listen. In the aftermath of the killings, 2 names filled news reports and social media posts. Jennifer and Andre. But quietly, painfully, there were 2 more names left behind. Children. Still too young to process what had happened. Old enough to remember every second of it. They were in the car when it happened. Not injured. But changed. What do you say to a child after they witness something like that? How do you tell them that the person they once called Dad is the same man who destroyed their world? Jennifer's family stepped in. Immediate relatives, aunts, cousins, all tried to offer comfort. But even they knew, there are wounds you can't dress with words. These weren't just children grieving their mother. They were living through the first few hours of a lifelong trauma. And for a while, the questions were too heavy for anyone to answer. Jennifer's name began to circulate far beyond her North Lauderdale neighborhood. People shared videos of her, smiling, dancing, giving motivational advice on social media. One post showed her telling viewers to choose happiness, even in the face of adversity. That line struck people in the chest. Choose happiness. From a woman who had lived through years of emotional abuse, who'd worked 3 jobs, who raised her children alone while trying to help a man who didn't want to be helped. Jennifer didn't just preach perseverance. She embodied it. And her story, her tragedy, began to resonate with women everywhere. Online communities shared her image. Domestic violence survivors posted their own stories, their own close calls. Strangers held candlelight vigils. And slowly the hashtag justice for Jennifer began to trend. Not because justice was still pending, but because it felt like justice had come far too late. Even after the case was closed, the public still had questions. Why wasn't the restraining order enforced longer? Why was there no immediate follow-up when she dropped it? Why was someone with a known pattern of abuse allowed to roam free? And the question no one could ignore. How many other Jennifers are out there right now? You see, most domestic violence cases don't end in murder. But the signs? They're almost always the same. Control. Isolation. Gaslighting. Financial dependency. Sudden mood shifts. Guilt trips. Suicidal threats when boundaries are set. Jennifer's story wasn't just tragic. It was predictable. Not because she failed, but because the system did. Let's look back, not to point blame but to understand what went wrong. Jennifer filed a restraining order in 2018. But within 3 weeks it was dropped. Court records suggest she chose not to pursue it, something many survivors do when faced with fear, guilt, or manipulation. At the time, Andre had already shown patterns of instability. No job, frequent mood swings, substance use, and emotional coercion. Even after their divorce in 2020, he continued to contact her. Sometimes with threats, sometimes with pleas. And Jennifer, perhaps out of compassion, perhaps out of fear, still helped him. Gave him money. Tried to connect him with pastors, mentors. She never wanted to abandon him completely. And that may have sealed her fate. In one of her last social media posts, Jennifer wrote, "Let go of what hurts. Take the initiative. Today is the day." It wasn't meant to be a goodbye. But when her family read it days later, it felt like one. Her aunt, Balanda, who was the same age as her daughter and described her as a best friend, said, "He took my niece. He took my best friend. We did everything we could to help him. And this is what we got." You could hear the ache in her voice, not just from loss but from betrayal. Because Jennifer never stopped trying to fix the cracks. She believed love could heal what time had shattered. And when she finally gave up, finally chose herself, it was too late. What happened to Jennifer is horrifying. But even more horrifying? It's not rare. In the United States alone, more than 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of domestic violence. Thousands file restraining orders every year. And yet, for many, the threat doesn't end with ink on a page. It ends at the front door, at the grocery store, in the driveway, while loading kids into the car. Jennifer did everything right, or as right as the system allowed her to. And still she was failed. Jennifer Bellony was not a case number. She was a mother, a provider, a mentor, and a light in her community. Her daughter, whose name now lives in every story told about that day, was not a footnote. She was her mother's joy, her twin flame. And the two of them? They were more than victims. They were warnings. And now, they are a voice. If you're watching this and feel shaken, good. If you're watching this and feel angry, even better. Because these stories don't just exist to haunt us. They exist to wake us up. If you or someone you know is experiencing emotional abuse, control, manipulation, threats, say something. Document it. Tell someone. Don't wait for proof in the form of bruises or broken glass. Because Jennifer's story proves something we often forget. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a woman can do is leave. And that's when she needs protection the most. When deputies opened that gas station door, they found Andre alone. No fanfare. No final statement. No apology. Just silence and a single shot. A man who couldn't face consequences. A man who made one final, cowardly decision. But Jennifer? Jennifer faced her fears every single day. She raised her kids alone. She built a business from scratch. She gave until she had nothing left, and even then she gave more. In a world that tried to break her, she stood tall. And when she finally said, "No more," it cost her everything. But now we remember her not as a victim, but as a warrior silenced too soon. This story moved you? Share it. Comment below. Let Jennifer's name ring louder than the silence she left behind. And if you haven't already, subscribe to True Crime Watch HD. Because we tell the stories others forget. And every voice we amplify might just save the next one.